This week you're going to be revising and editing your literary analysis, and this is going to be much like the revising and editing you've done on some of your other stuff, but there's some different things you're going to need to look at this week. So let's take a look at that and just dig a little deeper into that. First, what do you need first? Well, you might be sitting looking at a whole stack of papers now, just like this picture. You might feel like you've got way too much information. But hopefully what you have right now is your first draft. You can't edit or revise something without having a draft written, so make sure you do have your first draft with you. I suggest that you print it out, that you write your notes on your paper, and go through the content that you have already. Also, you want to look at your notes from your tutor. Your tutor has taken some time to read through your paper and hopefully has given you some really good notes and things to work on in this draft. I also suggest that you read the textbook examples and don't just read them to say, all right, I'm finished reading them. Read them to get a deep understanding of them. Do what is called close reading. That's looking to make sure that every single word is important. It was written there for a reason. And as you're reading your textbook examples, take some notes. The notes should be a place where you say, you know what, this piece of information right here, or the way this author did this writing is fantastic. Or I think I should be able to use a transition or something like that. So just take some notes as you're reading and move from there. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take a look at your introduction. The introduction is going to set the tone for your whole paper. It's going to introduce your topic. It's going to lay out the research you've done, which you don't need to do a lot of research for this, but you do need to support your points using the text that you are analyzing. And then you want to give a brief overview of the material. This is not a summary. This is just a brief overview, and then you lay out your thesis. All these things in the introduction are very important. Your thesis is going to be the thing that sets out the entirety of the whole paper. You're going to be arguing for a particular meaning or highlighting a theme, a character, a plot feature, or an aspect of the setting. You can show how the story interacts with the historical, cultural, or religious context of the day. You're going to suggest how it helps understand a larger idea or phenomenon in the world, or how it fits into an author's overall point of view for all of the works that they work on, that kind of thing. Just make sure that you're doing this in your introduction. Your introduction is the place where you're setting the tone. You're saying, this is what I'm writing my paper about. Your thesis needs to be arguable as well. Remember that it can't just be your opinion. It needs to be an opinion backed up with some sort of some level of something that can be researched. One of the next things you can do to help make your paper a little bit better is to work on the transitions. The transitions are the place that go from one idea to another or from one paragraph to another. And the transition is generally a sentence or two, and they are found at the beginning and the end of every single paragraph. And the reason why they're found at the beginning and the end is you transition out of one and into another. So at the end of one paragraph, you transition out of that idea and into another, and then at the beginning of the next paragraph, you're referencing what has just come before, just a word or two, some key words that show the connection between the two, and then moves it into the new idea. So this will create a cohesive paper. The cohesive material will all be together and it'll help the paper flow better. So it will read like it's one paper instead of 5, 10, 15 random paragraphs that are just thrown together. Because without transitions, you can look at your paper like this. Without a transition, you can remove a paragraph and it would not be missed because there's no indication that a paragraph is there. With your transitions, don't do things like first I'm going to talk about, second I'm going to talk about, last I'm going to talk about. Don't do that. Those are not strong transitions. Um, and you also don't want to use things like firstly, secondly, lastly, that kind of thing. Just make your point, but don't be obvious about your transitions. You don't say, in the last paragraph we talked about, or I talked about, or whatever. You shouldn't use first person in this paper anyway, but in the last paragraph, the discussion of whatever, don't reference it like that. Be smooth with your transitions. And if you need some help with writing strong transitions, then maybe what you can do is pay attention to the last paragraph, the last sentence or two of some of the essays that you're supposed to be reading for this week. Then, after you have worked on your introduction, made sure that the body is strong, has good transitions, then you're going to work on your conclusion. Your conclusion is not just an ending to the paper. It's not, by the way, the end. Your conclusion serves a purpose. It does show that this paper is over now, but it does some more things than that. So your conclusion is going to restate your thesis. This is not going to be a word-for-word repetition of your thesis, but it's going to be one that restates it in a new form. Now that we have done this, we can see that this has been proven, this has been proven, this has been proven. And by restating your thesis, it is then showing that your thesis was proven. And then it gives an overview of the paper. It's not a summary of your paper. It's not my paper in the first paragraph I talked about this item. It is an overview of it. It is the whole idea in total. And it's definitely not a summary. Do not summarize your paper in your conclusion. You do need to give an overview, but not a summary. This is also not a place for a last thought. It's not a place for, oh, by the way, now that we've done all this, here's my last thought. This is not a prologue. This is the place for the paper to end. It's not just, by the way, I have one more piece of information. Also, there should be no new information in your thesis and your conclusion. If you have brought about any information that's brand new in your conclusion, then what you need to do is back up and seed that information in the paper itself. So there should be no new information in your conclusion at all. So as you're reading through that, make sure that you are concluding correctly. The next thing you're going to want to do is tighten the text a little bit. So this image here, hopefully, of tightening the belt will help you remember that what you need to do is tighten the text. And the way that you can do that is you look for repeated thoughts. You look for things that are something that you have restated over and over again. Maybe you had a point that you wanted to make, but you might have made it a few times. So look for those repeated thoughts and see if they can be trimmed out. Look for contradictions. Maybe in one paragraph you said how a certain Shakespearean sonnet was the only place that Shakespeare used this type of rhyming pattern or this type of subject. And then later on you say Shakespeare used this type of rhyming subject or this pattern in all of his sonnets. So make sure, and that would then contradict what you have said. So make sure that you have, you're not having contradictions. Also, what you want to do is make sure you have proper spelling. Now, this is something that you are probably going to find easily if you do a grammar check, but just the Word document, the Microsoft Office grammar and spelling checker will not check words that are spelled correctly if they're in the wrong context. So if you use a homonym, for example, or in a place, it's not going to tell you that it's the wrong word. So make sure that you use proper spelling, read through it, and use grammar, because again, the grammar checker on your Word document program is good, but it's not the best. And then look for some unnecessary words. And I'll give you some examples of some unnecessary words in this. As you're looking for those unnecessary words, let's look at some of them. First one you want to look at and look for is the word you. This Y-O-U, you should not be referring to second person at all in the paper. So make sure that you don't say you at all. It's easy to write this word in your writing. Use it all the time. But just make sure that you is not used unless it is in a direct quote. Likewise, I should not be in there. You should not use first person throughout this paper at all. Make sure that everything is written in the proper tense and the proper person. Also, the word we. We is first person plural. We also shows that you might have a co-author. So don't say we are going to do this in this paper or we have found this, because you most likely do not have a co-author, and it is also first person plural, so you need to stay away from that. Which is a good transition into this word, that. That is a word that can generally be removed from all writing. What I suggest is every time that you come across the word that, just take the word out and then read the sentence to see if it works without the word that. If it does, then just leave it. Leave it gone. If it doesn't, put it back in. This word does serve a purpose, but it can be overused. It can be like an in your writing. Another word is that you need to look out for is then. This is usually mistaken, then and than, T-H-A-N. These are mistaken for each other. Then is a unit of time. It was then that something happened. Than is used for comparison. So if you're going to have something talk about it happened then or happened in the past, use then. If you are saying this is bigger than something else, then use than. So make sure you're using the correct then or than. And these are not going to show up in your spelling check as you go through it. Towards. This one is an interesting one. There are some words, because of our language and how we have borrowed from a few different countries, there are some words that are used in some countries but not in others. Towards is one. This word, towards, with the S, is a British word. This is used, also I believe it's used in Canada, but the towards with the S is a British word. So just remove the S, and toward is the spelling that we use here in America. Or in North America, I guess. Also, make sure you're looking out for slang. Try not to use words that you would use in a general conversation. Some older examples are saying something is tight. Hey man, that's tight. Or something is cool or awesome or things like that. Try to stay away from slang. Slang is generally generally informal, and you're trying to be more formal in this literary analysis. The word kids, you probably are not coming across this, but maybe you have. Kids is a slang word for children, but a kid is a young goat. So unless you're talking about young goats, do not use the word kids. Cliches. These are things that people say all the time, and they get into your language, but cliches are different where you come from. So maybe you have a different cliche in California than I do over here in Virginia. Some things that mean things for us might not be similar for you in California. So these cliches should be removed from your paper. Cliches are not always clear, and they are are generally something that can be removed, and they don't help much. Lastly are colloquialisms. These are regional specific cliches. These are things that are said in a specific place. I have only been to California a handful of times, so I don't know many colloquialisms that are there, but a colloquialism for where I live is you're talking about something, and to say that I hope it doesn't happen, or we will do this as long as we are able, instead of saying that, you'll say if the creek doesn't rise. Actually, what they would say is if the creek don't rise. But if the creek doesn't rise, then we will do this, which means we'll do this as long as there's not a flood, or we'll do this as long as we are able. So look for colloquialisms and remove them from your papers as well. And here's a reminder about some editing techniques and just some techniques you can do for revising. What I first suggest is that you print your paper out. Sure, it's easy to open the document and have it on your screen and make the changes right there, but there's something about reading it on a paper. There's first off, you read it on a printed piece of paper, something you're holding, there's a better comprehension. But also, if you have it on a piece of paper, you can feel a better connection to your writing. So as you print it out, you can write directly on your paper, you can mark on it, and then you will then make the changes on your document. And if you make changes on a piece of paper, you can't accidentally delete something that you have on your computer screen. I also suggest that you read it out loud. Reading it out loud will help you hear any of the spots where your paper might not be as strong as it could be. And this is also a time when reading it out loud, you'll hear any places where the text is not as fluid as it could be. You're going to hear those transitions where they're kind of a little bit awkward. If reading it out loud doesn't work directly for you, it's not something that you're able to do. Maybe you're too embarrassed to read it out loud for some reason. You could have somebody read it to you. Have a friend or family member read the paper to you. I do suggest you have a copy with you so you can make notes on your paper as they are reading it to you. But hearing the words, if it's read out loud by you or read out loud by somebody else, you're going to hear any of these places where the text just doesn't flow correctly. You can also read it backwards. This will help you because we have a short amount of time here between weeks. So if you read it backwards, you read the last line and see how that reads, and then go up all the way until you hit the first line. And as you're doing that, you're able to see the text for itself instead of the piece as a whole. If you see the piece as a whole piece, it can be a little bit more difficult to cut things out. You can do one line at a time. So you just take one sentence or one full line of text. Maybe that's a sentence and a half or something, or maybe it's just half of one sentence. So one line at a time, and read the work and see where things will need to be changed. So this does take time to do one line at a time, but it's definitely helpful. Or you can do one paragraph at a time. By looking at one paragraph, you can see how your paragraph flows from the beginning of the paragraph to the end of the paragraph. You can see that transition and the mini thesis that's in that paragraph to see, yes, here's my mini thesis, yes, I proved all of my points in here, and then I'm moving into my next topic. I have a strong transition into my next topic. Or, because this is not just going to be a 5-paragraph essay, this is a multiple page essay, you can do it one topic at a time with your thesis. So if your thesis, for example, has 3 specific topics you talk about, look at the first topic that you have mentioned in your paper and go and edit that specific portion. And just look through that specific topic and edit that whole thing, that whole section, and then go through the next topic and edit that whole topic and then the last one. So if you go through editing in just specific topics that will keep your mind on track.